everybody, to the Menrva Lounge. I am joined by Ellen Syversen today, who is our functional nutritionist at Menrva. Just super excited to dig in. So, Ellen, if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about your background.
Of course, yes. So I have been in the world of health for a very long time. I got my master's in public health many moons ago, and I was a health educator, worked for different organizations. And then once I had kids, I decided I wanted to have more flexibility and I wanted to really focus on the nutrition piece. So I went back and did more training through the Nutritional Therapy Association and the Institute of Restorative Health. And then I started my own business, and I've been seeing clients for 16 years. And now I'm part of Menrva, which I'm so excited about. Yeah. And I've always focused on, women and peri and postmenopause and, healthy hormone diets and all the things and gut health and, blood sugar. So yeah, all the hormone pieces for
That's
sure.
amazing. So, at what point did you realize this food pyramid that they've been sharing with us is not the right way that we should be approaching nutrition?
I know it was really hard for several years before I had kids. I worked for OSU Lane County Extension and I managed the nutrition program, and it was based on funded by USDA. So we had to
Mm,
really follow that food guide pyramid. But within that, we were doing a lot of education with women, with kids in schools that were low income. And so, there was some flexibility in kind of extending that a little bit to focus on the healthy fats and not like 100% carb-based diet. But yeah, it was a little hard for me because I was moving more towards a holistic model at the same time. And so just kind of did the best with that I could. But yeah, definitely through the Nutritional Therapy Association, it just turns that pyramid upside down.
yeah, definitely. What would you say was the biggest aha, especially affecting women, that you found in that?
Honestly, for me, I mean, because in the world of public health, going to get my master's in public health, I mean, we're just taught that fat is not good, and through, the NTA, it's like that is a huge focus, that it's about the right kinds of fats and all the roles that fats play with blood sugar and hormone balance. So that was a big aha moment that, like, oh, I don't need to keep all saturated fats out of my diet. I just need to kind of like upgrade the fats that I'm using, stop using those seed oils. I used to have canola in my house, and kind of switching
Yeah.
to the olive oil and the avocado oil and not being afraid of those foods. So that
Yeah.
was, yeah, those things were really eye-opening.
Yeah, I remember in the
Definitely.
90s being on a fat-free diet
Yes,
and
didn't we all do that? We
buying
all did that.
cookies that we
Yes.
ate like they were going out of style, and basically
Yes.
just eating like pretzels and all of these super processed, foods, and
Yes.
believing that I was making healthy
Yeah.
choices. So,
No, I did all the same things that you're talking about. Remember the snack wells?
yes, I remember the snack wells.
Yeah, it was all about like carbs, 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 and then I couldn't figure out why I was not losing weight or why I
Yeah.
was gaining weight. And yeah,
I
now we
remember
all
a
know
couple
better.
times like eating fat-free hot dogs and thinking I was being healthy,
Exactly. Yep.
And now you look back and you're like, oh my goodness, I wish I could take all that out of my
I
body. So,
know.
well, let's dig in
Definitely.
a little bit to,
Yes.
what affects a lot of women. So many women feel like they're eating the same way, but they've suddenly like started to gain weight, especially around their midsection in their belly. Tell us a little
Mhm.
bit more about what's going on in the body that causes that.
Oh, 100%. And I always like to start with just saying, like, ladies, it's not your fault. Like,
Mm.
this is biology. This is the fact that the diet that worked for us in our 20s and 30s, we just have different bodies in our late 40s, 50s, and beyond. And so a lot of things are going on there. We tend to start losing muscle mass as those hormones decline,
Yeah.
right? And unfortunately, when estrogen declines, we tend to get a little bit more insulin resistant, meaning we're not processing glucose as well. And some people start to notice, like, oh my gosh, I went to my doctor and they told me I was pre-diabetic. So these changes start happening. And I think it catches a lot of women off guard. One of my best friends, we walk all the time. She's one of those teeny tiny women who's been able to eat massive quantities of food her entire life,
Mm.
never had to think about it.
I don't like
And
her.
I know, it's like she's so wonderful. Otherwise, I would hate her. But we were walking a couple weeks ago and she's going through the menopause transition and she's like, I've gained 5 pounds. I can't believe it. I've never gained weight in my life. What am I doing wrong? And I'm like, do you just want to complain or do you want my advice? So even women like that have never had to think about it, right? Because that estrogen's declining. And so insulin resistance, we want to be sensitive to insulin, meaning we're processing those carbs really well. So that's one of the big changes. And then unfortunately, that gives our body signals to kind of store fat, especially around the middle,
Mm.
where we
Okay.
tend to get that belly fat. And it's not that subcutaneous fat that's right under the surface. It's more like around the organs. And, it tends to be really hard to get rid of once it's there.
Yeah.
So these are some of the changes that happen. And
What's the best decision that a woman can make to be able to combat that?
yeah. Yeah. So one of the things I know we're all hearing about on social media is protein, 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 right? And some of these trends that are out there, I don't really agree with, but this is a good one, even though it's overwhelming for some people. They don't know where to start. There was a really funny post on Facebook. It was this woman in her kitchen with her head on her table, kind of her head down sideways, and she had all these protein powders around her. And she was like, I feel more pressure to eat protein in my 40s than I did to do drugs in college. And so I thought that was a little funny. But the good news is, we can start incorporating more protein so we can kind of keep that muscle mass. And we know that muscle is metabolic health. And so we really want to prioritize protein in the diet. And it can be overwhelming because you start hearing about, like, oh, we're supposed to eat 100 grams, 150 grams. So with my clients, I just say, let's start small. Let's focus on breakfast.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's get 30, 40 grams of protein in at the beginning of the day, because that sets up your mood, your blood sugar, your stamina for the rest of the day, because protein really stabilizes that blood sugar. And then you're less likely to like crash in the afternoon and like grab for that processed food. And so really starting your day with 30, 40 grams of protein. We can talk
Yeah.
about what that looks like if you want.
I would love that because that's another one of the things like we're
Yes.
combating a lot of old news, right? Or fake
Yes.
news. Like eggs for
Yes.
a long time people thought they were bad because of the
Yes.
cholesterol or whatnot. What would you recommend that we started our day
Exactly.
with?
Exactly. Yeah. And it is a little tricky sometimes to get all that protein in, but like one easy thing that I love to do is make a veggie frittata, right? Because you get some eggs, you get some fiber in there with vegetables. But unfortunately, eggs, although they're very bioavailable, they're not super high in protein. So I generally will have like a protein smoothie on the side, with some whey powder and some kale and berries and fibrous food. So you're getting the fiber and then you're getting the protein from the shake and also from the eggs. And eggs are a source of healthy fats. And we know that fats are the precursor to all our sex and steroid hormones,
Yeah.
in that hormone pathway. So that is a great place to start and then kind of getting in a habit with that. And then you can kind of add on from there. But
Okay.
definitely, yeah, starting the day that way is awesome.
So tell me a little bit more about what anabolic resistance means that would affect
Yes.
protein.
Yeah. So unfortunately, what happens, as we move through menopause is our muscles are are less responsive to protein signals. So there's this big myth, right? That we all need to eat less protein as we get older. I don't even know where that came from. To me, that's kind of crazy. Like, who came up with that and spread that rumor? But the opposite is true. We actually need more protein as we age because we're not absorbing it as well. And we know protein's so important for muscle mass. And, protein's like a glucose disposal system, or muscle is a glucose disposal system in the body. So it's really important, to eat protein, to keep that muscle mass, and also to help regulate blood sugar. Yeah.
Yeah. What are some just great protein snacks that you might recommend
Yeah,
to the ladies watching
definitely.
or listening?
Definitely. So, I mean, jerky is a little processed, but sometimes, it's okay to do something. I mean, it's still a good source of protein, so that's one option for people. Definitely, if you can do dairy, I mean, obviously some Greek yogurt for a snack with some berries is a great option. And if you can do cheese, obviously that's an option as well. So, just trying to have smaller amounts, in between meals is always a good idea. Nuts and seeds, have some protein as well, and
Okay.
also help stabilize blood sugar. So those are some
Yeah.
options.
Speaking of
Yeah.
blood sugar, like why is it important that we stabilize our blood sugar? I mean, I think a lot of us without
Yeah.
diabetes or pre-diabetes don't even think about blood sugar. And yet it affects how we feel. Like what would I be feeling if my blood sugar was a little off and I needed that
Yeah.
stabilization?
Yeah, well, definitely, without starting that day with some quality protein, I mean, you're likely to kind of spike and dip, right, with your blood sugar. And what we want is more like the rolling hills of the Midwest versus, the Alps and the valleys and the spike and the dip. So, yeah, so protein can really help with that. I'm sorry, tell me the follow-up to that again.
No, just when it comes to your blood sugar, like
Yes.
how does that affect us if our blood sugar
Yeah.
is like, what kind of symptoms would we have?
Yeah. I mean, often really people notice less stamina and their energy might tank in the afternoon. That's a pretty
Okay.
common one. It's that like stereotypical, like head on the desk at 3 in the afternoon and really struggling to kind of get through the day. And I remember when I worked in more of an office setting and, didn't work at home virtually, that's when you see people in the kitchen, in the office, and they're grabbing chocolate and they're grabbing ultra processed food because they're just feeling that dip in energy and they're trying
Yeah.
to like support that with caffeine and sugar and all the things that help in the short term, but then make it worse in the long term. Because
Yeah.
when you fuel your body with those processed carbs, you get the quick spike. So you feel better for a little bit, but then it kind of drops you off. So I would say like just the changes in energy spiking and dipping throughout the day versus kind of that, that more constant, steady energy that we're all looking for.
For
So
sure.
yeah, yeah. And sometimes we just, when our blood sugar is spiking and dipping, cortisol follows, and cortisol is a stress hormone, right? So that
Okay.
blood sugar dysregulation creates those spikes and dips in cortisol. And obviously, that's when sometimes people feel like wired and tired, that kind of feeling. So that's like
Yeah.
another common complaint I hear from clients.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. So when it comes to muscle, because I'm midlife and
Yeah.
notice
Yeah.
like I'm working out, doing the things, but definitely have had a more challenging time. Like how does like if I'm not getting that much protein, because I know a lot of women that barely get 20, 30 grams of protein a day. Because
Exactly.
they're eating salads and they're trying to lose weight. Like how does that really
Yeah.
affect your body's ability to build muscle?
Yeah. So, definitely, I mean, that's really common that, women are not eating enough. And, I've looked at hundreds of food journals over the years, and I actually can't think of that many times where I saw somebody's macronutrients, the proteins, the carbs, the healthy fats really dialed in. And I'm not really sure why that is, because I've always loved my protein.
Yeah.
Right. So I just think, women would I mean, we like gravitate towards the carbs and the other things. And so that just kind of gets left out of the picture. And I think there's this misconception, well, I don't want to gain weight. I don't want to be like over muscular. But the thing is muscle is metabolic power, right? And so that actually helps us maintain our weight and prevent us from getting, those, extra fat stores around the middle and that kind of thing. So it's really, really important to just kind of shift that mindset a little bit. And, I think luckily, strength training and eating more protein is kind of trending, and people are starting to understand a little bit more why that's important. But the
Yeah.
more we maintain our muscle mass, the easier time we're going to have of maintaining our weight and not becoming insulin resistant and keeping our blood sugar numbers looking good on our labs and that type of thing. So I think a lot of women, and I have these conversations all the time, it's just really about switching that mindset a little bit
Yeah.
into just more balance in your diet and, looking at those macros with the protein, carbs, and fats, and not just like leaving the protein out completely.
Yeah. Well, with macros, because some of us have heard about macro diets or whatnot. Can you elaborate a little bit more on what that is?
Yeah, yeah. And I think a good place to start is just starting to, think about like, 30 to 40% of your diet being protein and, 30% being healthy carbohydrates, trying to focus more on, the vegetables and the whole grains and, winter squash, root vegetables, things like that. And then making sure that we're eating the right types of fats. We want to avoid some of those more processed fats and the seed oils and really focus more on olive oil, avocado oil. Some saturated fats aren't a terrible thing. A little bit of butter here and there is not going to hurt anybody. And so just really kind of, like a 30-30-40 kind of thing. If you're
Yeah.
eating 40% carbs, you want about half of those to be from non-starchy vegetables,
Okay.
because that's where fiber comes in. We know that fiber is really important for a number of reasons.
Yeah, well, let's dig into fiber because that's another
Yeah.
thing. I mean, some days I'm like, I have to be super intentional around getting
Yes.
enough protein, but I also have
Yes.
to be super intentional about getting enough fiber, especially when I'm traveling. That's where it seems
Yes.
to impact me the most, just because I tend to not eat as I guess just
Oh,
I just don't eat the
absolutely.
same as I do at home. So tell me more about like why do we need fiber and what does it do
Mhm.
when it comes to digestion and our overall metabolic health?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's definitely a really good one to dig into. So, the average American gets like 8 grams of fiber a day, which really is not enough. We should be aiming for like 35 grams of fiber. And so, there's so many things that fiber does. There's actually some research out there showing that if we're eating enough fiber, that we can reduce belly fat by 24% over 16 weeks.
Wow.
So that's pretty huge. And also, getting enough fiber helps you reduce that risk of cardiovascular issues by like 31%. So I am not against supplementing, but obviously you always want to be food first. But when
Yeah.
you were mentioning travel, that might be a good time to just get some, supplemental fiber, put it in a little Ziploc and take that
Yeah.
with you, because we're not eating as many vegetables and we're kind of on the go and on the run. But at home, I mean, definitely there's a lot of ways to do this that are easier than people might think. So, there's two kinds of fiber. One is the soluble fiber, and that's the kind that breaks down in water. So think of things that are gelatinous, like chia seeds or flax. If
Okay.
you're like stewing apples, they get kind of gelatinous as well. So those kinds of foods. And that type of fiber is really, really important for stabilizing blood sugar and like slowing down the absorption of glucose. And it's also really important in the gut for escorting excess cholesterol out of the body. So it's really good for keeping cholesterol levels healthy. And then the insoluble fiber does not break down, and that's more for bulking stools. It's more for regularity and motility. So it's not really that important to always have to be like, oh, am I having soluble or insoluble? It's more about eating a variety of foods, right? You're going to hit those fiber targets if you're focusing on vegetables and, having nuts and seeds in your diet. Like throw some pumpkin seeds on your salad, right?
Okay.
um, Put a little bit of flax in the smoothie. Just make sure you're having a vegetable with each meal. And nuts and seeds as snacks, that's a great form of fiber, plus healthy fats and some protein.
Yeah.
So yeah, it really just helps stabilize that blood sugar, and it also like helps the gut, the microbiome feed the good bacteria.
Yeah, tell me more about that because a lot of people don't even know. Like I'm big into gut health
Exactly.
and I'll make comments to people that are struggling, especially with immune system issues. Like,
Yes.
hey, you should
Yes.
really check out your gut microbiome because it is what
Yes.
is it? Like, explain
Yes.
it to somebody that might not know what their gut microbiome is.
100%. That's a great thing to talk about. So we have like 3 pounds of gut bacteria, and we
Three
want
pounds?
yeah, we have a lot of gut bacteria and they have a lot of jobs. And it's kind of like the analogy I like is that of a jungle, right? We've got our animals that we think are so cute, the birds, and, we want to see the koalas and the sloths. And there's the snakes and the nasty little bugs and creepy crawlies, right? And so it's kind of the same with our microbiome. We have this jungle, right? And it's okay if there's some snakes and creepy crawlies there, but we want there to be a predominance of, the species that are more, that we more enjoy seeing and running into in nature, right? And so when we are eating fiber and we're eating vegetables and we're balanced in the way that we're approaching that, we're feeding the good bacteria,
Okay.
right? And so we want to aim for that for so many different things because we want that diverse microbiome. We want that diverse jungle. And we know that 80% of our immune system is located in our gut. And so
Mm,
that's really related. And so, like, for example, right now I'm working with someone and we just did some stool testing, and her microbiome, like, she doesn't have anything crazy going on, no crazy gut infections, but her microbiome is depleted. Like, all the species are on the very low end.
mm,
So instead of like focusing on, pathogens and eliminating those, we are just focusing on feeding that microbiome. Now, she is doing some supplemental fibers so we can get in there quickly and get that process going while we're working on the diet, while we're working on adding more healthy carbohydrates and vegetables and healthy fats, and, making sure she's getting enough protein, because, we want to be feeding the good guys. We want a
yeah.
very healthy neighborhood or jungle, so to speak,
Yeah.
to support our immune system and support our
So
health overall.
this is a challenging question.
Okay.
So
Okay.
given that
I'm bracing.
80% of our immune system is there,
Yes.
why do you not think traditional medicine is encouraging people to
Mhm.
check their gut microbiome out?
Right. I know when people go in and like they see their gastroenterologist, they'll run a panel, but it's really looking for, those crazy, E. coli or something like that, that's going to put you into the hospital. But unfortunately, in like standard medical schools, not only do doctors have like zero training in nutrition or like how to help women through menopause, but they don't really dive into that piece. And
Yeah.
so the story that I hear a lot is a client went to see their doctor and then got referred to the gastroenterologist and they were told, oh, you have IBS. And maybe if that doctor's somewhat informed or they have nutritionists on board, they're given like a low FODMAP diet or something like that. But generally, they're not thinking about microbiome. They're not thinking about, all like your gut lining and the importance of that and the balance of good and bad bacteria. It's just not part of the training right now. And that's why so many people are really interested in functional medicine and functional nutrition. And what we all do at Menrva, right, is kind of, looking at the hormone piece and how that's all affected. So I just think it's just not, unfortunately,
Yeah, it
part of
is.
that training, and it's unfortunate.
Yeah. It is definitely something that we want to revolutionize at Menrva.
Yes,
One of our partners, Dr. Eddie Romo, published some studies linking, leaky gut to Alzheimer's at a higher level than genetic.
exactly,
And
exactly.
so when we think about just how important it is, we definitely want to take care of it. So
Yeah,
switching over to another function of fiber. Now, there's not a day, if anybody is on social media or on
yep,
television, that they do not see a GLP ad. And a lot of people don't necessarily know that GLPs are actually produced in our own body
yes,
naturally without
yes,
needing to go inject ourselves. So tell me a little bit more about how fiber
exactly.
works with GLP in our body.
Yeah, so GLP-1s are just gut hormones and they help regulate appetite and blood sugar. And so we produce them naturally. And so fiber really supports that mechanism, right? And just like an overall healthy diet, very clean eating. If you want to pick a diet, like let's just talk about the Mediterranean diet, right? Because that includes plenty of protein, healthy fats, and lots of vegetables and fiber and things like that. So we want to be eating this healthy diet. So we have natural GLP-1 helping us feel satiated, helping with that blood sugar balance. But so many people don't have a great neighborhood, right? Or their jungle is like there's too many snakes and too many creepy crawlies and not enough of the good stuff. So when we're out of balance, that's kind of where, everything kind of gets off in our bodies, right? And
Yeah.
so maybe that GLP-1 just isn't functioning the way that it would if we were eating, more fiber in our diet, more vegetables and things like that. So we're not getting the benefits
Yeah. Do
there.
you
And yeah.
do you recommend like counting fiber, or like are you just more about, hey, if you're eating enough, vegetables and other things that you should be okay?
Yeah, I think, when people feel they have to do things like that, they often won't do it. So I talk more about where are you at and where do we want to go, right? So let's say I'm working with someone and they just like maybe they only like zucchini. That's the only thing that they're eating once a day, right? So then we're going to talk about like, let's maybe try a few new things. And I often tell them, like, I want you to go to the farmer's market, but I don't want you to buy more than one or two vegetables because I've had the thing happen where they go and they fill up their grocery bag with all these new vegetables and then they get home and get overwhelmed, don't know what to do, and they all go in the
Yeah.
compost, right? So
Yeah.
it's just like, I'm very much into habit stacking. So where are you now and what are the goals we're trying to achieve and how do we get there in a way that's manageable for you for your life? And so
Yeah.
often I'll start by just recommending they just add some cruciferous vegetables. That would be like, the cabbage, the cauliflower, the Brussels sprouts, the radishes. Maybe it's like, hey, we're just going to have one salad with dinner and we're going to make sure, you've got some radishes on there. And maybe when you have that smoothie, we're going to throw some kale in there, right? So just like
Yeah.
things that are really easy that I know that they can do. And then we just keep building on that.
I love it.
And
So
it's the same with
salads,
yeah.
yeah,
Can I
salads when I
say
was
that
growing up,
yeah,
yeah, when I
like
was
the
growing
big
up,
ass
Ellen,
salad.
yeah, no, but let me tell you, the salads
Oh,
I had growing up were iceberg lettuce
right.
with Best Foods mayonnaise on it, And like
It's
maybe like it is so interesting now. I just love,
yes.
piling on a bunch of different
Yeah,
things on there. So
I
what about
know.
green juices? Because I think again,
Hmm.
we're seeing all of these options in the grocery store for
Hmm.
green machine or other things that have a lot of
Yeah,
these in here. Like, are they a
sure.
good option? Or, because I've also noticed some of them have too much sugar in it. And so
That's
I
the
don't feel
thing.
great if I have them.
Right. I mean, if you're, pressing juice at home and it's fresh and unadulterated, great. And obviously, I would much rather you go to a convenience store and get a green juice than get a soda. Right.
Mhm.
So it's kind of like, kind of there's the ultimate thing and then there's what you're going to do in that moment. But
Yeah.
generally I prefer people adding things to smoothies. Like I tend to add spinach or kale to my smoothies, along with berries, which are low sugar, high fiber, right? I'd rather people get things from whole food. And sometimes when you're juicing, you're taking out the fiber, right? And you're
Yeah.
just getting the juice. Now, there are micronutrients there, so it's not the worst thing in the world. But like you said, out there in the world, if you're just purchasing things, they do often have a lot of sugar.
And how does
And
it change the vegetable if I cook it? So, for example, like
yeah,
I love cauliflower and
yeah,
broccoli and spinach and kale and all these other
yeah.
things. If I'm now cooking these vegetables, does it change?
I mean, I think we lose some of the nutrient content when we cook it, but like, I don't know about you, but like raw cauliflower or raw broccoli just doesn't really work for me at this point in my life, right? So kind of some vegetables actually like lightly steamed. If you notice broccoli, it's kind of a dull green, but then when you steam it, it brightens up and it's just easier to eat. It's easier to get down. It kind of just like digests better for a lot of people because bloating, right, is a big thing for people. And when you're starting to introduce more veggies, sometimes you can have that effect if you're just eating everything raw.
Yeah,
So I kind of
definitely.
save raw for the salads, things that we like on salads. I like to put pumpkin seeds on there and radishes and sprouts but so I probably wouldn't cook those things, but definitely, cabbage,
Okay.
cauliflower tend to be more digestible when they're cooked.
Awesome. Well, I just have a couple more questions, and I know you're going to come back and join us and give us more nutritional tips too. But for the women listening, we always hear about keto, low carb type diets. Are these a good option for women that are in perimenopause and menopause?
Yeah. So, I mean, that's a very wonderful question to ask because I mean, obviously those things are out there and people try them. I think they are a tool in the toolbox, right? Like if you're on like I worked with a woman who was doing everything right, but she had some genetic SNPs that made it really hard for her to lose weight. So we did keto for a couple months just to kind of move the needle. And then we kind of slowly transitioned to more of a paleo diet where she could eat more vegetables and fruits and things like that. And then when she was able to maintain her weight loss, then we kind of moved more to the Mediterranean diet. So I think it's a tool in the
Okay.
toolbox, but unfortunately, a lot of people stay on those long term and they're very low in fiber. Right. So the concern is that you're kind of starving that microbiome. And we know how important that is for the immune system and how important that fiber is for reducing belly fat and feeding the good bacteria and for so many and slowing down the absorption of blood sugar. So I think it's a tool. It's just not something to be on forever. And especially like the carnivore diet. I mean, that really is
Yeah.
going to starve the microbiome over time. I have
Yeah.
had colleagues, that just use it in the short term because nothing else is working for their gut. And
Yeah.
then they slowly transition off of it. So I would say it's a tool, but not
Okay.
something I would recommend staying on long term. Yeah.
Very good. And final question. So,
Okay.
we talked a lot about gut health today, and
Yes.
obviously Minerva is big into the hormone health,
Yes.
standards and whatnot. Like, what is the connection? Like, break it down a little bit between our gut health and our hormone health. Why are they interdependent?
So yeah, so many different things. If you think about all the things our gut does, we aren't just what we eat, we are what we digest of what we eat, right? And so we know that being able to digest the good food that we eat and get those nutrients is really important for hormone health. Like thyroid, for example, is very iodine dependent and selenium dependent and magnesium dependent. So, a lot of our organs and systems really depend on certain nutrients. So we want to have good digestive function and absorption. That's really, really important. I
Okay.
would say the other thing is that, when women are in perimenopause, diet can really support that hormone production. When we're postmenopause, the diet really supports hormone metabolism, right? And we detox excess estrogen metabolites through our GI tract. And so that's where fiber really helps. And, really making sure we're supporting that estrogen detox. And there's actually an enzyme called beta glucuronidase that you can see the results of that on a stool test. And when that's really high, I kind of think of it as like it's an enzyme that holds the hand of excess toxins, excess cholesterol, and excess estrogen metabolites. It holds their hand and escorts them out of the gut so
Wow.
they don't recirculate back to the liver. So when people aren't regular and they're not going to the bathroom every day, often that beta glucuronidase gets high and that bond is broken. It's no longer holding the hand of toxins and excess hormones. It goes back to the colon and through the portal vein back to the liver and recirculates. And that's really not a healthy thing for us overall. We want to take the
Yeah.
garbage and escort it out into the
Yeah.
garbage can, not recirculate the garbage. It would be like, the guy that picks up your garbage or the woman, they just bring it back into your house and dump it in the kitchen, right? Like that's not good. So,
No.
yeah, so that's a big part, and that's where fiber, right, really
Yeah.
comes into play and making sure. And if you have to supplement in the short term while you're fixing your diet, it's totally fine. I take a little bit of fiber, but like the one that I take, I think the dose is 2 scoops. I think I'm taking like half a scoop just to kind of,
Yeah.
help with that regularity and motility and just make sure I'm getting enough, just in case I had a day where maybe I didn't quite
Yeah.
get in as many veggies that I meant to. So yeah, so there's a lot of connections there. And it kind of goes back to that microbiome and the healthy jungle versus the jungle that's overrun by the snakes and the creepy crawlies. Just making
Yeah.
sure we're feeding that and escorting things out into the garbage and getting all the nutrients that we need.
That's amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming into Minerva
Oh, well,
Lounge
thank
today.
you
We're
for having
excited that
me.
you're on the team at Minerva,
Oh,
and that's
I'm
why our telemedicine includes, hormone, gut, and thyroid health here, just because we want to make sure women feel at their best. So, we are excited
absolutely.
definitely that you've tuned in today. Hopefully, this was great information. And make sure that you share it with your friends and get this out there. And we'll see you on the next one because we are going to sign off to be able to open it up for Q&A now. Thanks,
Okay.
Ellen.
All right. Thank you.